Hare Krishna and welcome to a video series about the book Alien Identities by Richard L. Thompson. He is the author of 5 books and 4 videos on science and philosophy. He received his PhD in mathematics from Cornell University. And he is a disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the founder of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. The teachings of the ancient Vedic scriptures regularly mention flying vehicles, which we call nowadays UFOs, unidentified flying objects. So, of course, in the Vedas they were identified. Very often they even had names. Richard L. Thompson was interested in this topic, and because of his scientific background, took the information of these ancient Indian scriptures and looked at them from a scientific point of view, and also included in his book accounts, modern accounts of sightings of such flying objects. So in this video series, I more or less read from the book and will share my thoughts on it. I find it a very interesting topic and want to present this in this video series. Normally my videos are in German, the German language, but because this book is in English, I stick to English. I will make also a series or reflections on these topics in German too. But for now, I just read and let's see what this book will tell us about this very interesting topic. And the title is also fascinating: Alien Identities. Because aliens are not known. So what are aliens? Are they existing at all? So this book seems to imply, or the title implies, that we can find out more about aliens or living entities which are not from this earth, or at least are not known to modern men. Maybe there are some unknown living entities on this earth, but somehow rather hidden. So let's see what he tells us. We start with the introduction. Today, if we scan the shelves of a university bookstore, we find many books describing the triumphs of science. These books tell us that physicists have understood the laws governing ordinary matter, and molecular biologists have explained life in terms of these laws. Although some scientists still find consciousness perplexing, we are told this problem will soon be solved by studying the brain. The books assure us that modern science has understood the evolution of species, the origin of life from the primordial soup, and the processes that form planets, stars, and galaxies. The frontier of fundamental physics has been pushed back to the beginning of the Big Bang, and we are on the verge of the final advance that will give us the theory of everything. Yet these same shelves occasionally display books about anomalous evidence that contradicts accepted scientific theories. There are several categories of anomalous evidence, including psychical phenomena, out-of-body experiences, past life memories, cryptozoology, as example Bigfoot, and archaeological anomalies. Oh, this is a word, sorry, my English is not my language, but I try my best. So in this first 2 paragraphs, he gives like an overview of what science wants to, of the scientific advancement, of that what science wants to be, or what science supposedly has achieved. All fields of human endeavor are covered by scientific achievements, and even the question, the riddling or the perplexing question about life itself shall very soon be solved or answered by science. The problem of consciousness very soon will be scientifically solved when we find the answers in the brain. So this book is actually from the 90s somewhere. So this hasn't happened from 93. First printing 93, 5,000 copies. So this means these are now 27. This book is written 27 years ago. This is quite long. So that what science, the optimism of science, might not have vanished, but the answers are not there. So he said then between all these scientific books, there are also books, even by scientists, so-called scientists at least, about anomalies. Or, Anomalien in German, you say Anomalie. Topics which are not explained by science. All kinds of interesting things like past life experience, out of body experiences, archaeological strange findings and things like this. So the UFO phenomena, which is around since some centuries actually, starting probably not with Roswell, but before also it was there. And as we will hear in the Vedic scriptures, it was documented that there were some sightings of flying objects even thousands of years ago. I show to the Bhagavatam because in front of me is a stack of these books. This looks a little, how to say, pop art. No, it's not pop art. It's a very ancient book. It's called Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a German version in Sanskrit. A very ancient text, as we see here. I can show you. It has the Sanskrit text inside. So these are the books which explain quite often actually about extraterrestrial life, about aliens and about their flying machines. So, and also in the modern literature we hear about it, and who has not heard about UFOs, or who does not believe in them? Some even believe in them. And of course we have so many movies about them. I grew up with so many movies, seeing so many movies about UFOs and aliens, like famous movie of Independence Day, and it was in the 90s. I don't know when, 95 or something, with Will Smith, called Independence Day. And they were attacked, of course, by the aliens and were fighting them back. But so many other movies, Mars Attack or things like this. So everyone knows about it. Some believe in it, some believe more or less in it. Some are open to it, some say it's completely not possible. But actually there are many scientists who are open for it, because the universe is very, very, very big. From a Vedic point of view, it is big. It says it's a huge globe, inverted globe, so to say, in which there are so many galaxies and so many dimensions even, and they're full of life. The Bhagavatam is very clear on that. The universe is full of life. And from a modern point of view, the universe is so big, and the chance that something like an evolution, which scientists very often proclaim, it could have happened at many places in the universe too. So we continue. So in recent years, however, the most prominent anomalous category has been UFOs, unidentified flying objects. Covers proclaim that thousands of responsible people have seen something inexplicable flying in the sky. Other covers announce visitations by strange-looking aliens, and still others hint darkly at sinister conspiracies and cover-ups. These books say that for decades people have been observing unknown flying objects that drastically violate the known laws of physics. They also declare that people have encountered human-like beings that pilot these strange craft and exhibit powers contrary to both science and common sense. Yeah, so he still talks about books which talk about unknown flying objects, unidentified flying objects, that's how it's called, and their pilots, and that they have also sometimes even powers which violate the known laws of physics. So I read the book some years ago, and sometimes I read through it a bit, so it's some time ago since I read it, so now I thought we'd discuss it. So he will present many cases of encounters between humans and flying objects and also their pilots. So this will be very interesting. It will be exciting to hear, and he will give also information from these ancient Vedic scriptures. So he wants to also show the authenticity of these books, the truth of these ancient Vedic scriptures when they talk about such things, because they are also in that sense scientifically proven. Yeah, so he says flying objects have been documented. Vedic scriptures also speak about flying objects, so we can also assume that these are true descriptions. For years I've been interested in the relationship between modern science and ancient Vedic worldview of India. I've been particularly concerned with the contrast between the mechanistic model of life developed by modern science and the animistic or soul-based conception of life that lies at the foundation of Vedic philosophy. The scientific model of life is based on experiments and careful reasoning, but by reducing life to a combination of atoms, it deprives it of all higher purpose and meaning. It reduces human values to behavioral patterns produced by cultural and physical evolution. These behavior patterns are contingent on accidental historical circumstances, and they have little to do with the fundamental nature of things. In contrast, the Vedic philosophy gives meaning to life by linking it with a transcendental level of reality, but in the process it brings in phenomena and categories of being that have no place in the theoretical picture of modern science. This naturally gives rise to the question of where the truth lies. Has modern science given a complete outline of life's fundamental principles, or has it perhaps given only a detailed but narrowed account of certain limited aspects of life? Yeah, modern science, can only work in a certain framework according to its own definition, and that what is outside that cannot exist because they claim to understand the principles of matter itself, and what is not ruled by these principles, by these laws, cannot exist because only matter exists. So we hear many interesting anomalies, I hope I say it right, this word, in life, which contradict the possibilities, or which are not possible according to modern science. So either modern science is not covering the whole reality, or these things are not right. I'm tending to the first possible explanation, that science is not covering everything, and there are things possible outside possible outside their understanding. So this book wants to show, there are many things which are not understood according to modern science. So it's also a science critique of science and the method of science and their capabilities. And in that sense, a quite exciting critique. Yeah, it's not criticizing the science internally, but shows something what is true, but not covered by science and abolished by science, or neglected or ignored by science out of some reason. With these interests, I was naturally somewhat intrigued with books when books on UFOs first began to appear prominently in the science section of university bookstores. So interesting, he as an academic, he was not reading UFO books from the esoteric department. But he says from the science department, there were scientists who were writing on these topics, and this is interesting, yeah. And I think, yeah, he will give many references. He's a scientist, right? He has so many references to where he quotes from. So many books he's quoting from. The bibliography starts here, goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages of different books or writers he quotes. So it's quite something. Of course, we would have to see if a scientist would go into it. He will evaluate each book which is quoted here, how scientific it really is. So, but at least we can see he's quoting from many different books. So these seemed as though they might shed some light on the nature of life, since they involved reported encounters between human beings and other intelligent life forms. But were any of the UFO reports credible? Of course, this is now the question. There are so many reports about it, but how credible are they? How can we accept them? And we should be scientific in coming to an answer to that. Not because I want that to be true, I just accept it, kind of a blind faith and hope. And we should not go into it and say, oh, it's not possible, and what cannot, it shall not be what cannot be. It cannot be what shall not be. So this shouldn't be the approach either, but more, a neutral approach to the question. Like many people, I had always shunned the topic of UFOs as something disreputable. So this is interesting. He was not open to it. He was not taking it serious. But when I first glanced at a picture of alien beings in one popular book, Intruders by Bud Hopkins, I never heard about that, they struck me as obvious products of psychopathology, and this did not enhance my attraction for the subject. So it seemed this was some sci-fi book, and he was not taking, of course, this book or the information serious. But on reading some of these books more carefully, interesting that he actually read some of these books then. Why was he reading then when he was not into it? So somehow curious he might have been. I saw that they seemed to contain substantial, though anecdotal, evidence for some very unusual occurrences. In particular, they seemed to be giving contemporary eyewitness accounts of many different life-related phenomena that are described in ancient Vedic texts. This led me to investigate the UFO phenomenon in greater depth and finally to write this book. Okay, it seems he was already taking serious Vedic scriptures, where this is explained. Sometimes it's not the main topic. Yeah, these Vedic scriptures are not about UFOs, but they are details in the Vedic universe. So he knew about the possibility of that, or even believed in that when he was believing in the Vedic scriptures. By the way, the author died. Very unfortunate. It is. I think it was maybe 10 years ago. So it seemed he was already accepting Vedic scriptures, and then he was also looking, because of that, into the modern accounts. So sometimes it's other way around, that people are interested in the UFO phenomena, and some or other should this come then to the Vedic information about UFOs and similar strange informations. But he was coming from the other side and was a scientist at the same time, and then he was taking it more serious. So there might be some parallels. This book is a comparative study of UFO literature and the Vedic literature of India. Okay, so he compares both descriptions about UFOs, and it will be interesting to which conclusions he will come. In the first 5 chapters, I give a broad survey of the material written on UFOs from the late 1940s up to the present. I've included this survey in an effort to give the reader an overview of the reported UFO phenomena. Many books on UFOs tend to leave out material that doesn't fit readily into a particular theoretical framework. This practice is natural, but it can be counterproductive because data that seems inconsequential or just plain wrong today may turn out to be significant later on as our understanding increases. Yeah, and this is a kind of a human thing. I experienced this also, a psychological thing. Then when we read things, we tend to take what we can understand, what fits in our worldview, in our understanding, in our philosophy. And these things which don't fit in, we neglect, don't take serious, or kind of blend out. How to say, cut it out. So this takes a great mind to accept information as it is, and just to accept it and then try to work it out, to understand it, and then to assimilate it. Of course, from a rational point of view, it has to be evaluated if we should assimilate this information. But if it stands this test, not from a subjective point of view, so to say, if it fits my philosophy, no, but if it goes through the filter of the rationality, then we should include new informations. The remaining 6 chapters introduce the Vedic literature and present detailed comparisons between phenomena reported in Vedic accounts and corresponding phenomena mentioned in UFO reports. The Vedic material is taken mainly from the Bhagavad Purana and Mahabharata. Okay, so this is the Bhagavad Purana or Srimad Bhagavatam. So he takes mainly from this text information and from Mahabharata, which is another text. By the way, I have an online shop and I have this book, the total book. It consists of 16 parts like that, even bigger. This is the German version, in the English language. It costs 350 euros. It's an encyclopedia of Vedic knowledge. But it's not only about UFOs, actually not much in comparison to the total text, but many accounts. But in comparison to this thousands and thousands of pages, it's not so much. Just not to lead you in the wrong direction, to say you're a book on, ancient book on, thousands of pages of ancient Vedic information about UFOs. No, it's a philosophical and theological text about Krishna consciousness, spiritual life, meditation, philosophy, creation story, and mainly about Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga means the yoga of devotion, the yoga of spiritual life. It's a very interesting book. I read it quite often, actually, the whole thing. So yeah, on my online shop, I have actually only one left. So whoever is the first, he can get it. But I ship only in Germany. So I know I can ship also outside of Germany, but might some cost involved for shipping. Maybe Europe is okay, but not overseas or outside EU. So where have I been? I also draw on the Ramayana and various late medieval texts that follow Vedic tradition. For Indologists, I should point out that the Puranas, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana are called the 5th Veda in text 1.4.20 of the Bhagavad Purana. Therefore, I will freely use the term Vedic to refer to them, even though some scholars insist that this term can be properly applied only to the Rig Veda. So this is some Vedic discussion, what can be called Vedic of these ancient texts, because some scholars say, okay, there are different phases of ancient Indian culture who brought out who created different texts. And to say Vedic to all of these phases, to all of these texts would be misleading. It's wrong. So there are different phases, and Vedic means actually the most ancient time and the most ancient scriptures. And it's said the Rig Veda is an ancient Vedic text, is the oldest, and so Vedic can only refer to culture and philosophy and times of the Rig Veda. But he says here no, because there's another point of view which includes all these ancient Sanskrit texts and all of them calls them Vedic. And I also tend to his not just literal, explanation of why he uses the term semantic, but from a philosophical point of view, I agree on that. And he quotes even here from a Vedic text who says like that all these Sanskrit texts are Vedas. The idea of comparing UFO accounts with Vedic literature is not new, but thus far this hasn't been done in a scholarly way. Yeah, I think that Erik van Däniken, who is a quite famous European researcher of UFO phenomena, he was also talking about Vedas describing UFOs, but more in a, I must admit, he is scholarly to some degree, scientific to some degree, but he is also sensational. So I also like the more sober-minded approach to this topic. The first attempt that I am aware of is the 1953 book entitled The Flying Saucers Have Landed by Desmond Leslie and the famous contactee George Adamski. In the first part of this book, Leslie quoted a number of passages from the Ramayana and the Mahabharata describing vimanas or flying Vedic flying machines, and a number of passages describing remarkable weapons that were used in Vedic times. Unfortunately, many of these passages are badly mistranslated and Leslie's account is particularly verseless. This is also what I experienced with this book. So information that the text, the parts of the Vedic texts are really not nicely translated, and there's much interpreted into the text, and yeah, it's written in a way to make it more sensational, so to say, and more like Star Wars description. Similar mistranslated passages from the Mahabharata have appeared in a number of popular books that follow in Leslie's footsteps. Here's an example showing how misleading these bad translations can be. Leslie quotes the following passage from the Karna Parva in the Pratap Chandra Roy's edition of the Mahabharata. So Mahabharata, just for information, is the biggest epic in the world. Has more than 100,000 verses in Sanskrit, which makes it bigger than the Iliad and the Odyssey of Homer taken together, which are the biggest epics in the Western world. So Mahabharata is a very large book, but also a very interesting book, which consists of an ancient story, the story of the ancient great India, which culminates in a huge battle, which includes, or which as the start as the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, the so-called and very famous Bhagavad Gita. And in the Mahabharata, there are also some descriptions of UFO accounts. So let's see what is quoted in the Mahabharata here, or what is the misquote. Karna took up the terrible weapon, the tongue of the destroyer, the sister of death, the terrible and effulgent weapon. When the Rakshasas saw that excellent and blazing weapon pointed up at them, they were afraid. The resplendent missile soared aloft into the night sky and entered the star-like formation, and reduced to ashes the Rakshasas Vimana. The enemy craft fell from the sky with a terrible noise. So this passage appears in the Drona Parva of the Mahabharata, not the Karna Parva, and here is what it actually says in addition of Pratap Roy. Okay, so the first thing, Karna Parva means like Parva is like a part of the text, and he says actually it was not from the Karna Parva but from the Drona Parva. Okay, that might not be such a problem, but let's see what the actual text says. That fierce weapon, which looked like the very tongue of the destroyer or the sister of death himself, the terrible and effulgent dart, Naikartana, was now hurled at the Rakshasa. Beholding that excellent and blazing weapon capable of piercing the body of every foe, in the hands of the Suta's son, the Rakshasa began to fly away in fear. Destroying that blazing illusion of Gatotkacha and piercing right through his breast, that resplendent dart soared aloft in the night and entered a starry constellation in the firmament. Having fought with many heroic Rakshasa and human warriors, Gatotkacha then uttered diverse terrible roars, fell deprived of life with that dart of Chakra. So this was different. There was no UFO in this description. Instead of reducing a Vamana to ashes, the weapon killed the Rakshasa Gatotkacha. Ghatotkacha is the name of a Rakshasa. Rakshasas are, in Vedic scriptures, they're like human-eating monsters, but with humanoid, human-eating monsters. So they're not like animals in that sense from their psychological abilities. They're more human. They have, self-reflection. They can speak, they can think, but they are like intelligent monsters, because very often monsters in literature and in film are portrayed as quite animalistic and quite sensual, so to say, and not very intelligent. Like the alien, even the alien in the Alien series is kind of a monster. It's not intelligent. There is not much going on, so to say. They are like animals. Whereas the monsters in the Vedas very often are very intelligent. And that makes them even more sinister, because they kind of know what to do and still do it, even like to do it, when they kill or do other bad things. Whereas an animal, more or less, it doesn't know what it does, even if it kills. It does it out of instinct, if there's something like instinct, but they are driven by the urge of nature, and it's so to say, it's we call it instinct, or it's programming, Whereas someone who has more abilities of reflection, knowing what he does, and still doing it, I think that makes him really bad. Like the alien, it has to kill. It's meant to kill, right? The alien kills. But if the alien could think, I'm killing because I want to kill. Should I kill? I still want. I do it. It's different than to just kill because it kills. So the Rakshasas are intelligent, humanoid, man-eating monsters. And he got killed in a battle. There's one guy called Karna who has a powerful weapon, and through this weapon, it was like a spear or something like this. It was a dart. It was like a huge, powerful dart, energetic dart, whatever how it was. And he killed this monster, which was flying. Could also fly with some mystic powers. It had no wings. It was flying by mystic powers. And then it fell because it got killed by this dart. So here the author takes up this point. Instead of reducing a Vimana to... Vimana is the Vedic word for a flying object. Like a UFO, a airplane, a plane. Instead of reducing a Vimana to ashes, the weapon killed the Rakshasa Ghatotkacha. And instead of an enemy craft falling with great noise, the Rakshasa fell while uttering terrible roars. I don't know how Leslie came up with his mistranslation, but it is typical of his book and others of its genre. Exactly, this is also what I encountered. So it was kind of sensational, attractive to read these things, but when I looked into the original literature and I saw that it was not so sensational, or not, it was sensational, but not in their context, in that situation, this UFO interest from that point of view. Now I was disappointed, disillusioned by their presentation. Nonetheless, there is a great deal of material in Vedic literature about flying machines called Vimanas that show striking resemblances to UFOs. So it's not because this part was mistranslated and there was no Vimana or no UFO that there are none in the Vedic literature. There are, but just we just want to get with a sober head to the issue or to the topics. All right. Even more important are Vedic accounts of the behavior and powers of human-like races that use these flying machines. There are many parallels between scientific details in these accounts and corresponding details in UFO close encounter cases. These parallels provide my main impetus for writing this book. Parallels between UFO cases and old Celtic and Germanic folklore have been explored by Jacques Vallée in two books, Passport to Magonia and Dimensions. In a sense, this book is an extension of Vallée's comparative method to the domain of ancient Indian culture. However, since the Vedic literature is much richer than the existing literature on old European folklore, it may be able to give us greater insights into the nature of the UFO phenomenon. Phenomenon. Okay, so he will look in detail about at these descriptions in Vedic scriptures and also the modern, and he will compare them. And there was an author, Jacques Vallée, who were doing the same thing with the comparing the modern descriptions with the Celtic or Germanic. It's interesting that these texts also have included such descriptions. But then he says that the Vedic literature is more vast and there might be more information inside, which is it's true. So I think that's it for the first part of our video. I said this will be a series. Hopefully we can go through the whole book, but it's not so big, but still 400 pages, and now we covered maybe 4 pages because I'm commenting and talking and thinking also about it. But I hope it will be an entertaining series with an entertaining topic. So stay tuned. Next part will be coming. So please support my work. Subscribe to my channel, even though the majority of my videos are in English. In German, but now I will do something in English too. Help my work with a donation. We're living on donations. And like the video. And if you don't like the video, then don't like it. No problem with that. So thank you so much and see you next time. Hare Krishna.